Welcome to London. You're currently in one of the boroughs of London, the City of Westminster. Its daytime population is somewhere around 1 million people. Actually, its residential population is about 250,000. So you are one of, say, 800,000 visitors to this area. It gives us a population density of about 100,000 people per square mile during the day. Just down the road, the City of London, the square mile has a daytime population of about 300,000. So we're talking quite a big place with quite a lot of people. And what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the context of London, my role and the role of the London Resilience Team, the Olympics in London, and then some thoughts on lessons that we have identified. I'm going to go slightly, I think, off what I've got on the slides, really following some sort of things which have already come up this morning. If you look as if you're falling asleep, or if I get completely lost, please tell me. Well, first of all, who am I? Well, I'm the London Resilience Manager. Interestingly, I can define London. It's defined in statute from 1963 or something like that. I can define manager very roughly. Ed did that earlier along. Resilience, well, there is a UK definition of resilience. It is quite wide. It's quite a wide definition, but lots of people have their own view of what resilience means. So an interesting role in itself, being unable to describe your own job. But really what I try and do is we're the coordinator, the greaser of resilience activity in London. And it's really two aspects. Planning, we support multi-agency planning, we provide a secretariat to the London Resilience Forum, and we lead the risk assessment work. So theoretically, there is a process of risk assessment through to all the various stages of plan development, exercising, and an outcome, which we can then assure against the risk register, and I'll come back to that later on. And of course, in response, we have a role in assessing whether there has been a London-wide incident, which deserves some form of London-wide partnership response, and provide advice on the capabilities available to our partnership in London on what is available for the senior officers making decisions. Who's making those decisions and who's in charge? Well, perhaps we'll come on to that in a minute. It's a complex place. As I say, you're one of roughly 750,000 visitors to the City of Westminster. Our partnership is about 170 organisations. Well, it was until recently, and it may change in April because, of course, the NHS is changing dramatically, and a large part of our organisation is the NHS. Quite what it's going to look like in April, I'm not so sure. The economy, well, if London stops, roughly 23% of the UK's economy grinds to a halt, so a key function must be keeping that going. Our population, 9 million, it's transient, and our risks, well, our risks are interesting. We're currently sitting in a basement of what used to be many hundreds of years ago a marsh, about 150 yards from the River Thames, which, as you know, is tidal. On either side of us are various buried culverts, rivers from the past. There are something like 17 tributaries to the River Thames, half of which have a flood response time of between 4 hours and 30 minutes. So actually, the ability to respond to a flood incident and do it in a timely fashion is quite interesting. Our governance complex, I work for the Greater London Authority. In charge of us in City Hall is the Mayor. Linking to Christina's comments earlier on, the Mayor has, by the way, if you have been watching the news whilst you're listening to me, has just called for a referendum on the EU. So some of those things Christina was talking about are continuing as we carry on today. 33 different London boroughs, each of whom have their own political beliefs, each of whom have their own approach to resilience. Lots of different organisations. Police forces, well, clearly a single police force, but there's also the City of London Police, British Transport Police, and during the Olympics, in a 100-yard walk past City Hall, I counted police officers from 5 different forces. To me, quite an interesting achievement from the Olympics. Our risks summarised there: flooding, human disease, telecoms failure. We've been taking a little bit of a swinger on this one, and we've put some of the threats in as well, really just to give an impression. It's not as defined as perhaps some of the risk registers you've seen, but we use this as an example of the sort of risks that we face in London. Note the impact of telecoms failure there. probably higher than in other parts of the country. Probably also needs further review because I know the telecoms industry has a view on it, but they have so far agreed to this. Moving on to the Olympics now, and I see this counter going. It was a bit like the Olympics numbers of days to go. Normal approach to project planning is if we get a bit too close to it, we move the target date, but we couldn't during the Olympics. It was a big event. It was a big event in terms of geography in London. You can see there all the hotspots from Transport for London, who did a lot of preparatory work in defining where the transport problems would be for the Olympics. Lots of people. The scale of the event was huge. Geographically, of course, for us in London, a lot of the activity is to the east of London. Normally, things are centred around here, the centre part of London. Time. Shown there, the Olympics were really interesting, actually, because London Resilience team moved from the old government office for London through to City Hall in January 2011. The regional office was closed in about May, June of 2010, so there was a little bit of a gap, but we essentially arrived and were told, the Olympics, get on with it. We did, and we worked with the partnership to do that. As you can see, though, a busy period. 5 years' worth of exercising, we calculate, in 5 months in the early part of this year. All the other events which Chris mentioned, the Diamond Jubilee, the many parallel events, a very busy period. And then September the 10th, the additional day of the Athletes' Parade, which we hadn't really put in our planning. But we got there. Our risk and planning assumptions, and this goes back to some of the stuff which Ed was talking about. Clear to a national level, there was a risk register prepared, planning assumptions prepared, and we did that at the London level as well with London Olympic risk planning assumptions. Essentially, we said there are no new risks in London. Flooding, human disease, the threats remain the same, but the impacts are different because we're working with a different population. Risk concentrated in a different area of London, a population which doesn't know London. If you tell me that my station to get home is closed, typically I can work out another way to get home. For Olympic visitors, particularly foreigners, they may not know that and therefore would need special help in achieving sort of overcoming impacts to transport. And our approach really was, let's keep it as business as usual, but we found really it was business as unusual because we started to bring together a whole lot of things as a partnership where we recognised that the usual wasn't going to work. Our multi-agency plans, well, we did a risk assessment, we developed our planning assumptions, we reviewed capabilities and we exercised, and then we assured ourselves, as a partnership through to the Cabinet Office. And interestingly there, this is where that long screwdriver leads to a disconnect, frankly, and this is something I haven't solved in my mind, is I don't think we have somehow worked out that link between risk and assurance, and how do we assure ourselves as a multi-agency group that we can manage a particular risk. Maybe we shouldn't, I don't know, but there is a process there, and certainly there were a number of comments made, well, if we, the LRF, and the chair of the LRF has to sign this document, is it the chair of the LRF who gets it in the neck should something go wrong? Haven't resolved the problem. I think it's something to be addressed in the future. C3I, command, control, coordination, intelligence, information sharing. Make friends before you need them, I think was our motto. And we've established a very good network within London and outside of links between different agencies. What we eventually ended up with was virtual multi-agency arrangements. A decision was made not to run an SCG for London. On balance, I think that was the right decision, but there was undoubtedly comment from central government to say that this was the wrong decision, and that continued up until Olympics Day -1. Those virtual multi-agency arrangements, I'll summarise in a minute, gave us the ability for 24/7 operations. It gave us the ability for regular reporting, and for the first time ever for the sustained period of the Olympics and the events beforehand, we in London Resilience team worked with our partners to present and prepare a daily report on the state of London. Perhaps a little bit basic, but it was there, so everything from weather to health to aspects of policing and that sort of thing were drawn together in a single document. And that allowed us to more easily move to emergency arrangements, to more easily understand the information picture for the event of an emergency. I don't think we've resolved really yet in London how we get that multi-agency picture together, but it's an issue to be resolved. Our structure looks something like this in our plan, bottom left there, daily operations in blue through the virtual multi-agency arrangements. If there are an incident which needs multi-agency coordination on a regular basis, essentially for sudden impact, police-led, based in the special operations room, a goal group and expanding from that. If it's a rising tide event, something coordinated through London Resilience Team or the most appropriate organisation. And in the most extreme of incidents, a strategic coordinating group, the full SCG. Our assumption was that that would not be called unless this were the most extreme of events. And I think, Chris, you would agree that that was the position that was the right position. Now, we've all heard of gold, silver and bronze. It's all quite simple, really. This is very roughly, and I say very roughly because it's probably slightly out of date, how London control rooms linked with each other during the Olympics. It is actually organised, you may not think so. Left-hand side, you've got the military, health, in green, transport, the Transport Coordination Centre, the first time transport has ever come together. So you have Network Rail, TfL, and others speaking to each other. And that was quite unusual, a tremendous success. It's closed, by the way. The various police forces working principally through the SOR, where there's a large number of liaison officers, but you see that safety and security network in blue there. And on the right-hand side, the more local authority-driven areas of local authorities, the GLA itself, and at the bottom, various organisations in the partnership like British Telecoms, other utility providers and others. And that is a reflection of our partnership. Those with the orange blobs on were at the time of writing those who received our daily brief. We've increased the number of people who receive that daily brief, but that gives you a picture of who we were sharing information with. A lot of those functions are now closed. So it's really useful for the Olympics, but they've now closed. Worth also, I think, thinking a little bit about communicating with the public. And I'm going to use the model of transport. Some of you may have visited London just before the Olympics and hear the mayor's voice saying, it's the big one, it's Nagasaki. Whether that was right or not, I don't know. I'm not going to make any comment on that. But a great deal of effort was done in terms of modifying the public's behaviour to ensure that the transport system was able to cope with the Olympics. And I think it's a really interesting model to think about resilience activity in the future, both in terms of raising awareness and in warning, informing people about emergencies. That awareness raising started about 18 months before the Olympics itself, with links with business from TfL, the Transport for London, to the bigger businesses to ensure that they could have support in modifying their logistic arrangements. During the Olympics, routine communication through a variety of ways. And a first also, what we call the business hub, the cross-sector security communications hub, it rolls off your tongue just like that, actually is our links with business. A Home Office police-led initiative with support from the London Resilience Partnership, a means of providing coordinated and authoritative and timely information to business during the course of the Olympics. That sent out a number of messages and is a model which I think is being taken forward, certainly in London, will probably be taken forward. The business world reckons that they can get an email message to roughly 3 million people within 30 minutes of a message being sent out through the cross-sector security communications hub. Whether they can get them to open those emails or not, I don't know. But I think it's given us a new way of communicating with some parts of the public. I've got some statistics here, which, as you can see, there's quite a lot of work done. So 2.5 million visits to the Get Out Ahead of the Games website, 26.5 to TfL. The travel ambassadors, remember we mentioned the risk at the beginning, we have lots of newcomers to London. Well, actually, a whole lot of people, the various ambassadors, were there to help people manage their travel. One of the examples I was told was in one of the main railway stations, the underground station attached to it was becoming overcrowded. For those of you who commute into London, you know the normal approach: close the gates, switch on the bell, tell everybody else they can't come in, and that's it. Actually, they gave ice creams to children who were heading towards the underground. That slowed all the families down, because the children had to stop and eat their ice cream, and then slowly the problem melted away, as it were. Was it effective? Well, TfL says that something like 30% of Londoners changed their transport habits as a result of those efforts being made to communicate with the public. So I think a really useful model. Can I also advertise a few other things? The MPS helicopter, does anybody follow that on Twitter? Is anybody a Twitter person here? It's got roughly 20,000 followers. I think that's a really interesting way of communicating with the public. The MPS events, when I looked at this, had 30,000. That's communicating with the public around demonstrations and things like that. And I noticed occasionally being used to communicate directly with potential demonstrators as well. And an example, and sorry, Chris, I'm sort of slightly stepping into your area of work, of communicating with the public through different ways. We've got our own Twitter website. It's got more than 600 followers now. There were no major incidents, and I must hurry on through this, but it's worth noting that there were roughly 154 incidents in where we had to share information across the partnership. One of those incidents was the biggest fire in London for many years, a 40-pump fire. Nobody noticed it. Actually, in part, that was because the wind was blowing towards the north rather than across the Olympic Stadium, but also the consequences were managed through that ability to communicate with different partners very quickly to ensure that the consequences were reduced very quickly. Some thoughts now. Now, these are not approved by the LRF. I think having the common goal, get ready for the Olympics, you've only got 48 seconds to go, really helped. Training and exercising. We're supposed to go risk assessment, plan, train, learn the lessons, go back again. Actually, we evolved into a network of friends and contacts through the exercising process. A great advantage. Command and control, I've mentioned already. Communicating, I've mentioned. The role of others. Don't forget that transport did much of the work in managing the risk by reducing demand. Telecoms providers, 4,500 miles, I think, of BTK being installed just for the Olympics. The mobile phone providers entered into new agreements to share facilities around the stadium. A whole lot of stuff done by those Category 2 responders, which really kept the Olympics going. We mustn't forget that. And to think about, you'll notice, if you're still awake, that much the same things. We don't have a common goal anymore. Our training and exercising, we're taking forward, and we actually have a group within the London Resilience Partnership looking at this, but I'm still uncomfortable about the insurance process. Communicating with the public, and I'm now 18 seconds to go, or just over. We have a model to look at. Whether we can invest in it, I don't know. Making friends, well, lots of the friends I made for the Olympics have now gone. It's really sad, isn't it? And actually, I felt quite sad when the Olympics were over. We've got to look at making new friends. And we have to remember the others who provided all that support to make the Olympics work. I apologise for going a few seconds over.